3 Indian sailors killed after U.S. military strike on a commercial vessel in the Gulf of Oman. Deaths were confirmed by India's shipping minister after their bodies were located and identified. Washington says it carried out, quote, a precision strike on a vessel after that vessel failed to follow instructions. It was carrying oil from Iran at that time. India's foreign ministry lodging a protest with the United States and summoning a top American diplomat in New Delhi. Families of the deceased have been informed and have expressed their grief and anger. Of those deaths, the first reported since the U.S. started efforts to blockade Iran-linked shipping in April. India's embassy in Oman also reporting a separate incident involving another tanker off Oman, but confirmed that all Indians on board are now safe. Iran's new body overseeing the Strait of Hormuz has confirmed a complete closure until further notice, citing tensions caused by American forces in the region. The U.S. military launching another round of airstrikes on Iran overnight, more intense and on a larger scale than the day before. Tehran, meanwhile, also launching retaliatory attacks on U.S. assets in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. Authorities in the 3 Gulf nations reporting interceptions of missiles, with Kuwait briefly closing its airspace. Iran criticizing the U.S. strikes as illegal and a flagrant violation of a ceasefire, warning it renders that ceasefire, quote, practically meaningless. Let's return to the U.S. strike that killed 3 Indian sailors in the Gulf of Oman. We're joined by Ishan Garg. He's covering the story for CNA from New Delhi. Ishan, what more do we know about this strike earlier this week and on its potential diplomatic implications?
Well, the diplomatic incident that followed that strike is a unique one because this is for the first time India has formally summoned a charge d'affaires of the U.S. Embassy here since President Donald Trump came to power for a second time. And India's Ministry of External Affairs says that they have condemned the strikes in very clear terms and have called for diplomacy. They have also condemned all attacks on civilian infrastructure and have once again reiterated India's position that the passage through the narrow waterway, which is the Strait of Hormuz, needs to be open. Indian government also says that they are working with the local officials there, also with the Indian embassy in Oman, to repatriate the 21 seafarers who were rescued, along with the mortal remains of the bodies of the 3 seafarers who have died. The family members of one of the seafarers who has died, they are now calling for an investigation into the captain of the ship, and they are saying that stern action needs to be taken against the person who was at the helm of the ship. Now, Indian government has not commented on exactly what happened and how the US government is calling this ship to be in violation of its orders, but it does say that India's position is that the waterways, international waterways rather, are open and are accessible to every party that wants to travel through it. Indian government also says that more than 18,000 seafarers are currently deployed in the region, highlighting just how crucial the situation is for Indian sea workers.
Thanks for that, Ishan Garg, there reporting for CNA from New Delhi. And here's Kate Fisher reporting for CNA live from Washington, D.C. Kate, we just heard from Ishan there. So the Indian government summoning the deputy head of the U.S. mission in New Delhi. Has Washington responded to this strike that caused 3 deaths in the Gulf of Oman?
Yeah, well, it has acknowledged that this strike did happen, but it is yet to publicly take any responsibility for the death of those 3 Indian sailors. CENTCOM, a statement from the US military, CENTCOM said that the US aircraft fired precision munitions into the engine room of this vessel after this vessel allegedly failed to comply with US instructions to comply with its blockade of Iranian ports. And as you said, in response, India has summoned this US diplomat to protest over what has happened. And meanwhile, this is not the only incident where we've seen US attacks on foreign vessels in that area of the Gulf of Oman. There are reports that Iran is saying that US projectiles hit an Iranian cargo barge in the Gulf of Oman. The crew, they say, have been rescued, but it is symptomatic perhaps of the US perhaps stepping up its blockade of those Iranian ports.
Okay, in this war, we are becoming accustomed to almost at least two separate fronts of engagement. So as the strikes continue, diplomacy also continuing. So good news certainly at this point, or there may be, on negotiations.
Yeah, that's right. Certainly, multiple reports suggest that negotiations between the US and Iran are continuing despite this uptick in aggression. And as you say, it's kind of characterized this whole conflict that the two things have happened almost simultaneously. I mean, even the whole thing began in February when the US and Israel began its strikes on Iran. That was during negotiations. The US was actively negotiating with Iran at the time it began this conflict. So it isn't new that the two could be happening simultaneously. And I think it's important to note that despite the uptick in strikes between the two, neither side have said that talks are dead and that negotiations are over. And indeed, there are some reports that a broad political framework has been negotiated by both sides and that they're down to sorting out these technical details. But of course, the issue has always been that these details are the real stumbling blocks. Things like, will frozen Iranian assets be made available to Iran? And what happens to sanctions, for example?
Thanks. Kate Fisher covering this story for CNA from Washington, D.C.